Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Cromwell Stone, 1992 collection of Andreas's Cromwell Stone stories. Andreas is a German cartoonist, and in the 80s he created his character Cromwell Stone. Andreas is probably best known for his character Rourke, and that was earlier than Cromwell Stone. And Cromwell Stone is just a character who gets into all kinds of, supernatural shenanigans. This comic is very H.P. Lovecrafty, and it's just some amazing art, as you shall soon see. This cover, I guess I could have looked through the comic. I have a feeling this is just a grab of one of the panels, though I can't remember specifically seeing this panel in there. So maybe he drew it for this comic. From Dark Horse Comics, Cromwell Stone appeared in their Cheval Noir anthology all throughout the late 80s. And so they were pretty new when they reprinted them. They weren't that old. Published, I believe these were published in France, though, because Andreas moved to France a long time ago. So he's basically a French artist, even though he's German born. Here we go. I like this very stylish title page with all this white space and just this nice little panel. Some interesting panelology in this. So as you can see the panels, and guys, look at this art. Obviously inspired by Bernie Wrightson. I'm curious if that Frankenstein book was out already. I bet it was. I bet he had his hands on this. Of course, that stuff's all inspired by early 20th century pen and ink guys, great illustrators. But this almost specifically looks very Wrightson-esque. I love this, just these weird panels showing Cromwell Stone in a panic running near the ocean side, and he's running towards this very odd building that's built into the cliff here with stilts. Doesn't look very structurally sound. Look at this beautiful sky. Ah, it's so impressive. Has a quote from H.P. Lovecraft: "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear." And so now we look inside this edifice, and it's a character named Houston Crown. He's writing in his journal. He's mentioned something about our numbers may be decreasing again. 10 years in a row, on the 20th December, one of our number dies. And he mentions, I guess apparently there's 3 survivors. Jack Farley, Cromwell Stone, our main character we saw on the first page, and Gordon Globe. So he's worried about who won't show up this year. So we don't know what he's talking about, but we will soon. His character very, very much like the Penguin. Very not realistic, his face. Nobody's ever had a nose or a face like this. But man, look at this, the beautiful backgrounds. Every panel is just stunning in this. He never lets up. It's not like, I'm not feeling it. This panel's going to be kind of crappy. They're all just astounding. So Cromwell Stone shows up at his front door, and he basically says, he just says, "They've been following me for 3 days now." And so we don't even really know what's going on at first. So he tells him about how he thinks Farley is gone, is disappeared. And he's been in contact with Farley because of this situation where it seems like every year one of them gets bumped off, one of this group who still don't know who they are. Him and Farley have been writing each other letters regularly just so they know that the other one's still alive. It's not like they're the best friends or anything. So Farley invited Cromwell Stone a week ago. He invited him to the same town. He lives in the same town as Houston Crown. And he's rereading, on the train, he read Jack Farley's last letter to him again. And even though it's just mostly pleasantries, at the end he says, I can't wait to see you, my dear Stone, so that together we can confront the creatures of the night who spy on us. And Cromwell Stone doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, that's a pretty cryptic, foreboding way to end a letter. So we're flashback. We see him when he first arrived in town, got off the train. This porter, almost like in the Dunwich Horror, nobody's commenting on it, but he's almost like this monstrosity. You can't really see him. I guess kind of here you can see him. But just like H.P. Lovecraft, everything's kind of like implied. He doesn't shove it in your face, like the gore or the violence. So just this weird guy at the station who kind of looks like a fucking monster. But he has his job and, nobody seems to care. This little kind of street urchin shows up, and the train conductor type guy, or the guy who works at for the train, he says, "You again, get the hell out of here, I told you." He scares him off. We don't know why. So he gives him directions to Farley's house, and Cromwell Stone begins his journey. In this comic, we see lots of pages like this. Look at all these panels here. There's some very moody storytelling. And there's lots of pages like this where he's walking through the city at night, and there's unseen things, and he kind of senses someone's watching him. He's always looking over his shoulder. Just look at the shadows on his face here. It's beautiful. This is almost like Steranko, like in the 80s or 70s and 80s. But of course, it's very much like Wrightson. It's like if Wrightson was more experimental with his storytelling and his panels and stuff. Look at that warped face there. So he gets to Jack Farley's house, and he really feels at this point something's chasing him. He's panicking. He says, "Open up, for God's sakes, please." And then he just kind of passes out from exhaustion right at the front door. Look at this amazing fence. It's like this amazing geometric design. Looks like something from Tron or something. It's crazy. And then in the morning, I guess he just fell asleep. He's been there all day, all night. The neighbor comes over, and he basically fills him in. He says, "Nobody's lived at this place for years." And he says, "But this is the address Jack Farley sent me." The neighbor says he's never heard of a Jack Farley. So it turns out the house is for rent. There's a sign there that he didn't see the night before. Look at the amazing architecture on this house. I don't know if there's houses like this in whatever country this is supposed to take place in, but that's really just cool looking. Of course, look at the beautiful trees in the background, the clouds. This is stunning art. So he calls up the landlord, and he says, "I'd like to rent this place." And that's what he does. And so we find out the neighbor's name. He comes over, introduces himself again. He says, "My name's John Emmanuel Brooke," with umlaut, so I think it's Brooke. And they exchange some pleasantries. They say, maybe we'll have you over for a drink sometime. Now he goes inside the house, and this is just remarkable, the insides of this house. Look at all this amazing design. God, Andreas should be an architect. He's so beautiful looking. It's rare that I read a comic where I'm like, the architecture that the people are walking through is this fascinating. So apparently there's a closet that he's not supposed to go into. The owner, keeps his stuff there. He does find the cellar, and he walks outside, and he's very happy to find, he has a measuring thing. He says, "this will fit my clock collection perfectly. It's tall enough, the ceiling." And look at all these crazy angles. He just moves the camera around like whiplash fashion. It definitely makes it more interesting, because this is kind of a slow-moving comic. It's very like H.P. Lovecraft. It's just really slowly setting up the sense of foreboding. Apparently the place is very cold all the time. Here's this fireplace, he lights it. And he notices that something's off here. Supposedly this place has been vacant. The telephone's still connected. Everything's clean. There's dry logs in the fire. So he's like, I don't know if I believe this Brooke guy. And when he lights the fire, this horrible stench arises. It's nauseating, he says. And then he finds this weird skeleton. He says, I've never seen a skeleton of any animal like this. It's just kind of a bulbous, yet tapered, weird skeleton of some, I don't know what it is. He doesn't either. And so he's looking at the skeleton closer and closer. We're zooming in. And then he does this really interesting change here, where now we're seeing the bars on the window of this guy's office. This is like, I assume, the next day. He's back at the train station, talking to that same kind of monstrous guy. That little street urchin comes in again. The train station guy starts getting rough with him, and Andreas basically says, hey, leave him alone. And he befriends the kid and says, come with me, I'll buy you a hot drink. So he goes to this cafe, buys him hot cocoa. The kid turns out to be mute. And the kid hands him this like stone with these weird markings on it. And so he leaves. Once again, he's walking through the city and he just kind of sees things in the corner of his eye and is freaking out again. Take note of these striped things, whatever that is, whatever you're seeing. You can't really tell. Almost doing. I used to read Cheval Noir. I have a lot of those. I can't remember any of the Cromwell Stone stories, to be honest. I can't remember anything in there. My memory's terrible. I haven't read those in 25 years. But it seems like Cromwell Stone is just this dude. Like, he's not heroic at all. He's just kind of like, I don't know, just keeps getting swept up in these weird incidences. So he's about to go to bed, but then he sees this light shining on his property. There's this weird building on the property. It's like past the garden. So he puts on his clothes and goes out to check it out. Somebody whacks him on the head and whacks him unconscious. I think this is what he's seeing, like in his dream, while he's knocked out. And look at this beautiful starscape. We see our solar system, and they zoom in, and we see these weird little striped creatures, which their shape looks very much like those skeletons, the skeleton in the house. Just the detail of this is beautiful. And it looks like they're swarming towards Earth. This like almost cloud of these weird creatures. He wakes up and he's kind of right near the ocean. Man, look at that sky, guys. That's fucking incredible. And there's this guy shows up. And he's, he sees him walking, trying to get up the cliff. He's like, oh, are you looking for passage? There's this like little secret stairwell. I'll show you where it is. I guess this guy lives down there near the waterfront in a little shack. He tells him a weird story about how centuries ago mariners were saved by sea serpents. They pushed a bunch of boats towards shore and hid them in caverns. But don't worry, it's only a legend, he says. Nobody ever found a shipwreck. And as Cromwell Stone goes up the staircase and heads home, he thinks to himself, that was a weird guy. And he just thinks last night was all a dream. Even though he wakes up, whatever, a quarter mile away from his house. Of course, when he gets back to his house, it's freezing again. I think I'm missing a page here, yeah. Once again, I love these long vertical panels. He's really abstracted his face sometimes. And apparently there's no door in this building that's beyond the garden. It's just this weird, mysterious building. And finally, his clocks arrive. The delivery men bring his clock collection. And when one of them's flat on its back, and he kind of says, goddamn delivery guys couldn't even put it up right. He manages to do it by himself, and then realizes it doesn't fit the ceiling within the room. It rubs against the ceiling, and he says, wait a second, I measured this. This doesn't make sense. I know how big my clocks are, and there should have been more than enough room. And then he hears a knock at the door, and it's Gordon Globe. In case you don't remember, that's one of the guys, the survivors of this nebulous group. Gordon Globe says he happens to be in the neighborhood. He's trying to explain to Gordon Globe how all these weird incidences. He's a little freaked out. And Gordon Globe poo-poos all of them. Cromwell Stone is a little becalmed. He's just like, yeah, you're probably right. And then Brooke shows up, the neighbor. He brings him a bottle of wine, like a housewarming gift. And he basically says, I don't want to bother you while your friend's here. I'll come back later. We'll have a drink. And then they go down to the basement to see the clock collection. He tells them about how the clocks don't fit now all of a sudden. And Globe says, here's the culprit. Your measuring thing is broken. Which I think he would have noticed. There's a lot of stuff in the story that really, if you really look at it, it's just like, what? Nobody would do that or say that. And we see Globe leaves, and when he walks down the street, he throws a piece of the broken ruler or the measuring device in the garbage. So he did it himself. Somehow he's hiding something, obviously, and he's trying to trick Andreas, Cromwell Stone. He says, let's find a good book for this evening. And he goes to the bookshelf. Look at this amazing bookshelf. This is the coolest fucking bookshelf I've ever seen. It's like a piece of art. And he finds a book written by George Leviathan Brooke, which is the same name as his neighbor. He says, it must be an ancestor. And he reads it, and it's some kind of weird, it sounds Lovecraftian. It says something about how man is foolish to believe he's the only intelligent being in the universe. But not only that, they're even more foolish that they think they're even the most intelligent being on Earth. Who's to say what other life forms are on Earth that could be much smarter than us? That could be our masters, basically. And it ends with saying, we cannot expect any pity from them after all. Goodness is a human invention, which that's not true at all. And so as he's going to bed, he pours himself a glass of that wine that Brooke brought over. And it's all just so beautiful. All these little panels. And he sees the light again, in that building. He goes out to see what the hell's going on again. Once again, look at his warped face here. And he collapses. He realizes the wine was drugged. And in his unconscious state, he has this flashback dream. And he's on the ship. And it's this horrible storm. Look at this beautiful, seascapes here. And we see these sea serpents. It's almost like he's dreaming about that story that the guy on the beach told him. And so he visits that guy again. He sees the mariner again. And he's got this sign that says Leviticus. The mariner says he found it on the beach. And it turns out that Cromwell Stone was on the Leviticus. I guess it was a famous story at the time. He was on a ship. The crew did a mutiny. There was some robbery or something other, and the inquiry into that distracted the captain so the mutineers could take over. All the passengers on the boat, the mutineers put him in a boat with no water or food. The Leviticus. And luckily they were saved. And it became a huge international story. It turns out this is why, the origin of that group. There was 13 of them, and over the past, 10 years, every year one of them is killed. So it's just this total mystery. And of course, Cromwell Stone's one of them. So every year they get together on December 20th, and every year there's one less of them. The mariner says, "Wouldn't it be wise to leave this area? You keep waking up on the beach." I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that, guys. Once he woke up on the beach again. There's his little shack. I love this. Like, it's built into the rocks here. This crappy little shack. Once again, Cromwell Stone finds his way home. And this woman's there. And she's the owner of the house, it turns out. And she seems kind of annoyed with him. Because he complained to the landlord, and she's there to basically in person say, "The house is cold because it's winter time. What do you expect?" And kind of scolds him almost. But some things she says don't quite jibe. He also the whole time is like, "Oh my God, her eyes remind me of someone," and her eyes remind him of Globe. He looks down in the cellar. And all of a sudden, the floor is rising, crushing his clocks. I have no idea how this relates to the rest of the story. I read it a couple times. There's a lot of things in here I'm just confused about, but it kind of reminds me of Lovecraft, where it's just like, that's kind of scary. I don't know why. It's definitely creepy and weird. And this seems weird too. She says, very sternly, she just says, "Have a drink." Like out of nowhere, he's all mad about his clocks, and she says, "Have a drink." And he does, even though he was just drugged. And so he's drugged once again. It's the same wine. It's Bruck's wine. And so, of course, he passes out. We see that stone that little street urchin gave him. It falls from his pocket onto the floor, and he passes out. Look at these crazy panels here. And then some pages, so many pages just totally straight. Just very simple panels. It's obviously for dramatic effect. Whenever something really dramatical happens. I know that's probably not a word. I just like to say dramatical. And I'm pretty sure, sorry guys, I think he's dreaming again because he's passed out. And he sees all of his dead comrades from that shipwreck. They're kind of glowing. And this intense cold is emanating from them. It's another amazing drawing there. I like this little panel here of him jumping down. So once again, he wakes up. And that Captain Partington's there. That's his name, guys. The mariner, Captain Partington. We find out that little kid is his son. And apparently that stone is almost like a protective amulet. The stone with the weird design on it. Cromwell Stone tells him he lost his. Remember, it fell out of his pocket. So he says, "Here, take mine. I'll go without." And they're running through this labyrinth in the caves near the sea. Man, look at all these horizontal panels. It's almost kind of hard to tell what's going on. It's such small slivers of the action. But for the most part, you can. It's pretty interesting. And they find that weird cave with all the shipwrecked boats. It's almost like an elephant's graveyard of capsized ships. They find an opening and they're climbing up. Strange. They're climbing up the ships, basically, using them as ladders. And he looks back and says, "Hurry, Captain." He says, "Captain, behind you." And once again, kind of like H.P. Lovecraft, we don't even see. A lot of people would be like, the artist would revel in showing you this cool, climactic, scary scene of a monster or whatever is behind him. But we don't even see it. We see Cromwell's reaction shot. I like this drawing too. That really reminds me of Wrightson. Oh, most of this does. And then it looks like the whole place collapses. For all of his illustrative skills, I gotta say, maybe he could be a better actual storyteller. Because a lot of times, I gotta be honest, I'm not quite sure what's going on in some of these panels. It's not quite clear. And then he sees Globe and the owner of the house. So he's back at his house. And now he's back at the house, but then he runs. He runs from these two. One of them's Globe is holding a huge axe. And now we're back to the present. We're back to his friend Houston Crown's weird house clinging to the cliff here. He's just told them the whole story. And then someone barges in and says, if you want answers, I have them. And it's Globe. He says, no more stupid games. I'm going to tell you what the hell's going on. And to be honest, sorry, I'm such a dummy. I'm not even quite sure the series of events here. So Globe tells him, 10 years ago, I boarded the Leviticus on the same ship you were on. A crew member and I kept a very important object. Let's call it a key. That's your word, which comes closest to the real function of the object. So I don't know if these guys are from another realm, from outer space, the way they're talking about I can't even explain what this is to you, but I guess the closest thing you humans have is a key. Somebody fooled us, got a hold of the key. We were forced to ask the captain to interfere, conduct an inquest. And this is also another confusing thing. Somehow this caused the mutiny, or the lack of surveillance. The captain was so busy with the inquest that the crew took that as an opportunity to mutiny. It's kind of odd. I know I'm nitpicking. I don't really care, to be honest. First of all, even if the story was complete nonsense, the art's so good, I love it. But it's also, this story's kind of all about mood. It's not like some elaborate whodunit or mystery or anything. So I guess they've been trying to retrieve the key all this time, or Globe has. And all Globe knows is that one of the 12 people on the lifeboat, one of them had the key, was the thief. So for 10 years, one by one, he's been killing them off. He knew he couldn't do it all at once. It would cause too much attention. It says the key is a key to a world. Almost like, I don't know, some interdimensional world, some other dimension. And so this is Brooke's son, even though that book is 200 years old. So obviously these guys are some kind of, I don't know what they are, aliens, supernatural beings. Brooke is over 2 centuries old, his neighbor, and he is part of Globe's cause. Even though they killed his father, he was converted. And Cromwell asks him, why are you, a man, a human being, a traitor to your own kind? And we close up on his eye, and we see one of those little creatures. Once again, guys, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. You see this chain? I think Cromwell Stone is throwing this chain towards Globe. Shatter something, I think, here. And we see Globe look up screaming. And I don't know what this is. He falls on a sword. I'm not sure. But then we see all of these beings, these creatures come out. And they all kind of just, like lemmings, go into this portal. And it looks like they just incinerate themselves. Because look, we see all their skeletons. And it turns out that Houston Crown has the key. But he never found out how to use it. It's one of those stones with the, design on it. And, I'm sorry. It's this weird little thing that looks the same striped appearance of those creatures, but it's like almost like this weird geometric sculpture. I think that's what's on the cover here. See this thing? That's the key, I guess. And he throws it out the window. Basically, because he's like, oh, all these people dead for this stupid key. So he, out of frustration, throws it out the window, lands in the ocean. And Cromwell Stone tells him, I'm going back. I'm going back to the house. Some more beautiful stuff. And then we see this amazing overhead shot of just, all the things in this room. So much detail here. And now we have an epilogue. And we see these two sailors talking about Captain Partington's son. I guess, Captain Partington died. Did I even mention that? I might have skipped that, guys. Sorry. But Captain Partington died, the father of the urchin. And the poor kid's living in a shack all by himself. And one of them says, hey, man, I caught something in my net today. You want to play with it, kid? And it's that key. So who knows what's going to happen with that? I don't know if this was ever continued because, Cromwell Stone continued for years. It was a serialized, there's many adventures of him. So sorry I was so befuddled, guys. To be honest, I am. And maybe I'm just dumb. But I do feel like that's part of Andreas' shtick, is he likes to have everything nebulous. You're not quite sure what's going on. And just very interesting. Now that I think about it, I don't think this is in the comic at all. I don't know if Andreas drew this just for this comic or not. Or maybe it's from the cover of the European comic of this. Hope you guys like looking at this. At the very least, I hope you like looking at the art. I mean, this art is astounding to me. If the art wasn't this stunning, I probably wouldn't even be keeping this comic. The story, I don't really have any urge to reread this again as for the story. But some of the imagery in here, and even I do like some of the concepts and some of the weird, interesting things Andreas throws in. But overall, it's not the best story. But man, this art is just blows my mind. I love that kind of pen and ink work. I know it's kind of old-fashioned and old-timey, but, well, I still love it. So I hope you guys enjoyed looking at it, and I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.